Bruce Willis leans into the microphone at one of the most watched charity galas in Los Angeles and tells Keanu Reeves, in front of a room of 800 people, that he does not belong on this stage. Not quietly, not privately, out loud. Into the microphone. With the cameras rolling, Keanu looks at him, nods once, stands up from the piano bench, sets the sheet music down, and walks off stage without a word. The audience does not make a sound. Not a single person claps. For 11 seconds, someone counted later, in the footage, the room is completely still. Then, something happened that no one in that ballroom will forget for the rest of their lives. There is a gala in downtown Los Angeles called the Brightwater Benefit. It is run every October for 19 years at the Medallion Grand, a hotel on Figueroa Street, where the chandeliers alone cost more than most people's cars, and the auction items start at $25,000. The event raises money for pediatric cancer research, and in a good year, it clears $2 million. In a great year, closer to $3 million. The dress code is black tie, not black tie preferred, black tie. The organizers enforce it at the door with the kind of quiet authority that communicates, before you have said a word to anyone, exactly what kind of room you are about to enter. 800 guests. Senators, studio heads, athletes, a former vice president who sits at the same table every year. The waiting list for a ticket is 11 months long, and the minimum donation to hold your place is $12,000. The entertainment program runs 40 minutes and has, over the years, featured a string quartet from the Vienna Philharmonic, a soprano from the Metropolitan Opera, and a jazz pianist from New Orleans named Marcus, who played for 3 presidents before he turned 50. This year, the program included a 15-minute set by Keanu Reeves. Not acting, not speaking, playing piano. He had been taking lessons seriously for 7 years, according to the people who knew him. He did not advertise it. He did not post about it. He showed up, practiced, got better. His instructor, a woman named Clara, 63 years old, who had taught at the Berklee College of Music for 2 decades before moving to California, said he had developed the kind of touch that takes most students 20 years to find. He was not performing for fame. He had enough of that. He was performing because a woman named Rosa, who chaired the event's music committee, had heard him play at a private gathering 2 years earlier and called him the following week. I cried, she told her co-chair. I didn't expect to. I just cried. He said yes without asking about the program or the billing. He arrived at the Medallion Grand alone. No assistant. No publicist. He parked 3 blocks away in a public garage, walked in through the main entrance carrying his sheet music in a manila folder, and asked a young woman at the registration desk where the green room was. He was wearing a dark gray suit, white shirt, no tie. The jacket slightly too long in the sleeve, as if it had been borrowed or bought years ago and never quite fit right. He had a small coffee stain on the left cuff that he either hadn't noticed or hadn't thought was worth worrying about. The young woman at the registration desk later described the moment to her mother. I didn't recognize him at first, she said. He just looked like a regular person, a nice regular person who seemed a little lost. His name was not on the sign by the door. The sign by the door read, An Evening of Excellence, headlined by Bruce Willis. Raymond Dale Willis, Bruce, to everyone who had known him for longer than 10 minutes, had been doing this kind of event since 1989. He had the cadence of it down like a man who had driven the same route for 30 years. The meet and greet at 6, the cocktail hour at 7, the dinner program at 8, the entertainment set at 9:15, the live auction at 10. He was 68 years old, and he still commanded a room the way a man commands a room, when he has spent 40 years being the most watched person in it. He moved slowly, He didn't need to move fast. The room adjusted to his pace, not the other way around. He had been the headliner at the Brightwater benefit for the last 4 years. He gave a brief speech about the cause, introduced the entertainment, participated in the auction, and left before the dessert course. He was reliable. He was present. He was generous with his time and his name. He did not know, when the evening began, that there was a second performer on the program. His manager, a trim man named Victor, who wore his earpiece even at formal events, had handled the logistics. Victor knew. He had confirmed it with Rosa's committee 3 weeks earlier. He had not thought to mention it to Bruce, because in 4 years of this event, the entertainment had always been other people. Bruce introduced them, received their applause along with his, and moved on. This year was different. This year, the second performer was someone whose name the room knew as well as Bruce's. Victor would later say he should have mentioned it. He would say this many times, to many people, in the weeks that followed. He was right. Bruce found out 45 minutes before showtime, in the green room, when he saw Keanu sitting quietly with a folder of sheet music in his lap. He recognized him immediately. Everyone in that building recognized him immediately. What crossed his face in that moment, the organizers who were present described it as something complicated. Not quite irritation, not quite surprise. Something older than either of those. Something that had nothing to do with Keanu Reeves, and everything to do with the specific wound that a man like Bruce Willis carries when he has spent 40 years measuring his own worth by the size of the rooms that wanted him. He shook Keanu's hand, said something pleasant. Left, he spent 15 minutes with Victor in the hallway outside the service entrance, speaking in a voice low enough that the catering staff couldn't hear. Victor would not say, later, exactly what was said in that conversation. What he would say is that he had seen Bruce like this before, and that the times he had seen Bruce like this, the results had varied. Sometimes he talked himself through it. Sometimes he didn't. This time, he didn't. The program began at 9:17 p.m. The room had finished its third course. The wine was still moving. The temperature in the Medallion Grand's main ballroom, the big room, the one with the 20-foot ceilings and the wall of west-facing windows, was exactly right. That specific warmth of a well-managed room where no one is uncomfortable but no one is quite ready to go home. Rosa stood at the podium and introduced the entertainment with the quiet fluency of a woman who had done this 19 times and loved every one. This year's program features 2 extraordinary artists, she said, and I am deeply grateful to both of them for the gift of their presence this evening. She introduced Keanu first. His name produced a sound from the room, not full applause, but the collective inhalation that precedes it, the moment before a crowd decides what to do with something unexpected. He walked out from the right side of the stage. Same dark gray suit. Same coffee stain on the cuff. He nodded to the room with the slightly awkward grace of a person who is comfortable with people, but never quite comfortable with attention. He sat down at the Steinway at center stage, set the manila folder on the music stand, and adjusted the bench. He played for 12 minutes. He played a short original piece first, something he had written himself, according to Clara, over the course of the previous winter. It was not technically perfect. There were 2 moments in the first 4 minutes where you could hear him find his way back from an edge. But it had something that technically perfect music often doesn't have. It had weight. It moved through the room like something that cost something to make. Then he played a piece by Eric Satie, Gymnopti No. 1, 3.5 minutes. He played it slowly, the way it was meant to be played, with the specific patience of someone who has learned that the silence between notes is part of the music. By the second minute, the room had gone completely quiet. Not politely quiet, Not the managed quiet of a formal event. Actually, quiet. The kind of quiet a room goes to when it has been reached. He finished, set his hands in his lap, looked at the piano for a moment. The applause was the long kind, the kind that keeps starting over. He nodded once, stood, walked back to his seat at the table nearest the stage. He did not have a front table. He had a regular table, back left, the kind you end up with when you say yes to an event without asking about logistics. Bruce was at the podium before the applause had finished. What happened next has been described by 47 different people in 47 slightly different ways. The video footage, shot by the event's official photographer whose camera was running, shows it without ambiguity. Bruce leaned into the microphone. He looked at the table where Keanu was sitting. He said, "That was lovely. Thank you. Though, I have to say, I'm not sure why the warm-up act is still in the room." He said it with a smile. That was the part people kept mentioning afterward. The smile. Like it was a joke. The room went silent again, not the earned silence of the sati. A different kind of silence, the kind a room goes to when it cannot immediately determine the appropriate response to what it has just heard. Keanu looked at him. Just looked. Not angry, not confused. Something quieter than either of those. Then he stood up, picked up his manila folder, nodded once, to Bruce, to the room, it was impossible to tell which, and walked off the stage. He walked slowly. He did not look back. He held the door for a server who was coming in from the kitchen with a tray of dessert plates. Then, he was gone. For 11 seconds, someone counted, in the footage. No one in that ballroom made a sound. Rosa was standing at the back of the room. She had her hand over her mouth. Beside her stood a young woman named Delia, 26 years old, the event's newest committee member, who had spent 4 months helping organize this evening, and who had personally handled the correspondence with Keanu's team. She had exchanged 7 emails with his assistant. She had confirmed the set list, the staging, the timing. She had written the introduction Rosa read from the podium. She looked at Rosa. Rosa looked at her. Neither of them said anything. Then Rosa said, very quietly, "Give me 10 minutes." She walked toward the door Keanu had just walked through. Delia stood in the back of the room and watched Bruce Willis begin his own set. He played a clip from a film score. He told a story about his early career. He was smooth. He was practiced. He had done this many times before. The applause was polite. Later, Delia would say that the applause for Bruce that night was the most uncomfortable thing she had ever heard. Not because it was loud, because it was careful. 800 people clapping with exactly the right amount of force to communicate that they were present, and that they were not sure. Rosa found him in the service corridor behind the main ballroom. He was sitting on a folding chair beside a utility cart, still holding his folder of sheet music, drinking a glass of water that a member of the catering staff had brought him without being asked. He looked up when she came through the door. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. That should not have happened." He shook his head. "It's all right. It is not all right." What he said, I know what he said. He said it gently. I've been in rooms like that before, not exactly like that, but close enough. She sat down on the edge of the utility cart. "I don't know what to say to you. You don't have to say anything." They were quiet for a moment. From the ballroom, muffled through the wall, they could hear the microphone and the careful applause. He looked down at the folder in his hands. "I didn't play for him," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't play for the billing or the room or any of that. I played because you asked me, and because it matters what this event does. The research. The kids. Rosa looked at him. Her eyes were wet. I know, she said. Then that's enough. He finished the water, set the glass down on the cart, stood up. I'd like to make a donation before I go, he said. If the table is still open. She looked at him for a moment. The auction doesn't close until 10:30. Then I have time. He walked back toward the registration area. Rosa watched him go. Later, she would say that was the moment she understood something about the difference between dignity and pride. Pride needs an audience. Dignity doesn't. It functions exactly the same whether anyone is watching or not. The auction table was staffed by 2 volunteers. A man named Gerald, 61 years old, who had been working this event since its 3rd year, and Delia, who Rosa had sent over when she realized what was happening. Keanu walked up to the table alone. He looked at the auction items. There were 14. Hand-signed sports memorabilia, a private cooking class with a Michelin-starred chef, a week in a donated villa in Sardinia, a commissioned portrait by a painter whose work currently sold for 6 figures. He spent a moment with each item, really looked at them, asked Gerald about one of the travel packages, who had donated it, how the proceeds were allocated. Gerald told him. Keanu nodded. Then he pointed to a lot at the end of the table. Lot 11. A pediatric research sponsorship, not an object, not an experience, but a direct funding commitment to a specific 3-year study on childhood leukemia being conducted at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. The opening bid was $40,000. As of 9:45 p.m., it had received 0 bids. No one's touched this one, Keanu said. Gerald nodded. It's not the easiest sell. People like to walk away with something. What would it take to fund the whole study? Gerald glanced at Delia. Delia looked at her tablet. The full budget is $320,000, she said. The event has already raised about $240 in tickets and sponsorships. The auction is meant to cover the gap. So $80,000, give or take. He nodded slowly. I'll bid $80,000 on lot 11. Delia looked at him. That closes the whole gap, she said. I know. She looked down at her tablet. Her hands were not entirely steady when she typed the number in. He signed the form. Gerald gave him a copy. He folded it twice and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, beside the coffee stain on the cuff. Then, he thanked them both by name, picked up his folder, walked back through the lobby and out the front door of the Medallion Grand. He did not walk through the ballroom on his way out. He did not go back past the stage. He went home the same way he had come, alone, on foot, 3 blocks to the public garage on Figueroa, in the dark gray suit that didn't quite fit right. By the time the live auction was announced at 10 o'clock, Lot 11 was no longer on the table. The MC, a comedian named Terrence, who had hosted this event 6 times, noticed it when he reviewed the items. He called Delia over. She told him what had happened. Terrence looked at the remaining 13 lots, looked at the room, looked at the empty space on the table where Lot 11 had been. Did he want to be announced? Terrence asked. He didn't say. Did he ask you not to? He didn't say that either. Terrence thought about it. He announced it. He did not frame it as a dramatic story. He did not linger. He simply said, "Before we begin the live auction, I want to note that Lot 11, the full pediatric research sponsorship, has been claimed in its entirety. The study at Children's Hospital Los Angeles is fully funded for 3 years. He paused. The donor asked to remain anonymous. He moved on to Lot 1. But the room did not move on immediately. 800 people sat with that information for a moment. Some of them looked at the empty chair at the table in the back left of the room. Some of them looked at the stage. Some of them looked at Bruce Willis, who was at his table near the front, his back straight, his face composed in the specific way of a man who has heard something and is deciding what to do with it. No one started clapping. That was the thing people mentioned later. There was no applause. There was something quieter than applause. A stillness that meant something different. Bruce Willis sat in that stillness for a moment. Then he stood up. He walked out of the main ballroom. He found Victor in the hallway and said 4 words that Victor would later describe as the most important 4 words he had heard from him in 23 years. I need to fix this. He did not reach Keanu that night. Keanu's phone went to voicemail. He called the next morning. Keanu picked up. The conversation lasted 41 minutes. No one else was on the call. What was said in those 41 minutes belongs to the 2 of them. What came after it is public record. Bruce made a donation to the Brightwater benefit 2 days later. Not to Lot 11. That was already funded. He called Rosa directly and asked what the event needed for the following year. What was underfunded. What had been on the wish list for a long time and never quite reached. She told him. He wrote the check. He also, and this was the part that no one expected, not even Rosa, not even Victor, he also called Clara, Keanu's piano teacher. He got her number through 3 phone calls and a favor from a mutual friend. He called her on a Tuesday afternoon and asked if she had space in her schedule for a new student. She did not know who was calling at first. When she understood, she was quiet for a moment. "How long have you been wanting to play?" she asked. 30 years, he said. "Maybe longer." "Then you're already late," she said. "Come Thursday." He came Thursday. He came the following Thursday. And the one after that. Clara later said he was the most self-conscious student she had ever taught. Not because of his skill. He was a beginner in the truest sense, starting from the beginning without embarrassment, but because of the way he held himself when he made mistakes. Like a man who had spent 40 years in rooms where mistakes were not permitted, and who was learning, slowly and at considerable personal cost, that this room was different. He would stop every time he hit a wrong note, she said. Just stop and look at his hands. Like he was waiting for someone to tell him to leave. "What did you do?" she was asked. "I told him to keep playing, every time. Just keep going." He kept going. Delia left the Brightwater committee 3 months after the gala. Not because of anything that happened. She left because a nonprofit in Oakland offered her a director position, and she took it, as she should have. On her last day, she found a note in her mailbox at the office. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper with her name on the outside. Inside, in handwriting she didn't recognize until she read the signature, was a single sentence. "The work you did mattered. The kids will never know your name, but the work mattered." She kept the note. She has it still. The Brightwater benefit the following year raised $3.4 million, the most in its 19-year history. The entertainment program featured a string quartet and, at the end of the set, an unannounced addition. 2 men sitting at a single piano, playing together. 4 hands on the same keys, a piece that Clara had arranged for them over the summer. One of them was better than the other. Anyone in the room could hear it. But they played together, start to finish. the better player adjusting his pace to the one who was still learning, not patronizing, not slowing down to make a point. Just playing together, the way two people play together when they have decided that the music matters more than who's ahead. The room gave them the long applause, the kind that keeps starting over. Neither of them needed it, but the room needed to give it, and so they stayed at the bench until it was done. I have told a lot of stories on this channel, and I keep coming back to this one, not for the reason I expected to. The obvious lesson is about humility, or grace under pressure, or the dignity of responding to cruelty without cruelty, and all of that is in there. But that's not what I keep thinking about. What I keep thinking about is the piano. 30 years of wanting to play something and never doing it. Then, a moment of shame becoming, somehow, a reason to begin. I don't know how that transformation works. I'm not sure anyone does. But I think most of us have a version of that 30 years, something we've been meaning to start, something we told ourselves we'd get to. I'm not going to tell you what to do with that thought. I think you already know. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for quiet dignity and generosity. All characters, events, and institutions depicted are invented. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment and tell me what you took from it. I read every one. If you know someone who needs to hear it today, share it with them. That's the whole point. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. See you in the next one.